Hello again, this is Crow from Global Music Club and the daily show, which you have, I hope, come accustomed to, the 10 Minutes Caws. We're in our second week and we're just loving it. So, if you remember, Tuesdays is the day we do our weekly review, and we have two reviewers for us. Stuart Turnbull is a bit busy at the moment doing some important stuff, and when I say important, it's really important. And we have our other in-house reviewer, Bill Rivers, and he is our guest today as he was last week. And I will pass on the screen to him in just a second. Hi there, Bill. Evening.
Hi,
Good evening where you are. And
yes,
again,
yeah.
okay, we've got a nice black and white look today. Love it.
Oh yeah. It's moody. Because the artist we're going to be talking about is very, very moody, I guess, very dark. So trying to get some atmosphere with what I have here.
Yeah.
So I shouldn't smile. Really, it's moody. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
And I'm just let me just, because I forgot, hit the record button. So just a second. Okay, we're good. I just wanted, before we start this week's review, just sort of get a comment that you posted after the live stream, because last week you did songs for Drella, and then you posted a comment saying what Drella actually meant. And I think it would be nice to start there and get it out there.
Yeah, sure. Well, Drella was the nickname for Andy Warhol, a mix between Dracula and Cinderella. Okay, so it's a great nickname, kind of to express his personality,
So
I guess.
fitting.
So that was his nickname, Drella. Yeah,
Okay.
Dracula.
Yeah, I think it was a nice detail that should not be go unmentioned.
Yeah, I thought about it afterwards, but there's going to be things, important things I miss
Yeah,
sometimes.
it's a live stream, and good that we have the comment section, and then we can get back to it the week after, and even some questions that people may post on the page, which is
That'd be
Global
great.
Music
Yeah.
Club, by the way, on Facebook, if you want to have a look. So what do you have for us today?
Okay, well, Bish, which is Scott Walker's last studio solo album. It's the review is not really just about this album. This kind of represents his later work, which I'm going to tie in with everything else. And in the 10 minutes, I'm going to try and cram in as much as I can to get to this album, Bish. Okay, it's not an album. It's a very challenging album. It's not an album. You're going to dance to, as it were. And some people, will probably think it's pretentious and self-indulgent. It is experimental and avant-garde. There's the kind of words we can use for it. But I think if you don't like it, fair enough. But to have an opinion on it, then the opinion's only valid if you kind of understand the album. But if you don't like it, you don't like it. But I'll explain, hopefully as clear as I can, as concise as I can. So really, we have to go backwards to the mid-'60s. Scott Walker was in a band called the Walker Brothers. So most people might know him with songs like The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore and Make It Easy on Yourself. Big sound, a bit like Phil Spector, Wall of Sound. Scott's voice, really big, great baritone voice. I've got a quote here. I have to read it because I don't want to get it wrong, by Ian Macmillan. He was a writer. He said Scott has an unforgettable voice, like a cathedral lit by a sunset. I mean, it's a wonderful way to describe Scott Walker's voice. And the Walker Brothers were as big as the Beatles in the mid-'60s. And there was like a teen band, like a boy band, pin-up band. He was seen as a heartthrob. And he was American. He was a foreigner to England. And so really, he's kind of thinking the Walker Brothers, that was it. It was going to be like a one-off thing. But what happened was, when Scott Walker left the Walker Brothers to go solo, he's really started to become a real artist. And he was a massive fan of Jacques Brel. And on the Walker Brothers actually wrote a couple of songs which were actually very similar to Brel's style, really about everyday people and situations and making them epic. I don't know if you know the film by Jacques Demy, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, as well, which is kind of like that, where it's a very ordinary situation with ordinary people, but making it into a big epic thing. And Scott Walker was also interested in kitchen sink dramas in England. He's obsessed with English culture because he was a foreigner there. Everything amazed him. And kitchen sink dramas, you know, again, the same thing about ordinary daily life. He put into songs and made them into big epic things. So you can see that Brel connection there as well. He was also a fan of Bergman's movies. And you could say his music was almost an audio of Bergman's visuals. So you can see here now he's getting very into art, as it were, and moving away from the teen image, you know, the pin-up. And so we did these 3 albums, and on those albums were Jacques Brel songs and his own compositions, which were very, as I say, very similar to Brel. But I'm going to jump straight to Scott 4. I mean, these albums are really worth looking into, but we haven't got time for that. I really want to try and get to the later material. So Scott 4, I think I mentioned that was the first album he wrote all the compositions, and one song in particular, Boy Child, which even today sounds really strange and unusual. It's a beautiful song. Musically and lyrically, it's almost like modern poetry. Instead of literally explaining something, it's kind of it evokes an atmosphere, or what, you know, something else is being said. Even the title "Boy Child" is very evocative, and to me, this is the beginnings of what was to come later. But unfortunately, the album didn't do well. He released another album after that with a few covers and his own compositions. It's okay, but nothing. It wasn't in the league of Scott 4 and Scott 3, for example. And then something happened. His personal life, I think he himself said he started drinking heavily. He was contracted to a record label, and he ended up releasing 4 albums of standard covers of songwriters like Mickey Newbury, Janis Ian, Michel Legrand, and Randy Newman. And I love these albums because, to me, his voice is amazing. I could listen to Scott sing who was that song, who let the dogs out. You know, he could make that sound exceptional, because I just love his voice. Scott himself, though, really wanted to disown those records later on and didn't want them to be re-released, which I understand, because he wanted to be taken as a serious artist and not an entertainer. And I'm sure his manager, because he has that kind of crooner voice, thought he was going to be like making money in Vegas or something, and how wrong he was. And so what happened then after that, the Walker Brothers reunited, had a bit of a hit with the Tom Rush song No Regrets. And then after their second album, they'd released 2 albums. The second one, it wasn't selling well. Punk was happening. They were out of date. And it was contracted for 1 more album, and the record company didn't care. So you could do what you like. And Scott took the bull by the horns, as it were. And this album, Night Flights, is seen as an extended EP, really. It has the first 4 songs are Scott's, and the rest are kind of not really worth, you know, nothing to write home about. It's those first 4 songs, which are, even today, just sound phenomenal. They could have been written tomorrow. They're that great. The Electrician, especially, which is a song that's told by the torturer who's torturing someone with some sadistic glee. The song is terrifying and beautiful at the same time. There's amazing middle orchestration in the bit. But here we see the origins of Scott's songwriting. Again, the lyrics evoke something rather than being literal. You really get the feeling of it. It's very, very dark. And then you have this kind of rhythm, and then it suddenly burst into something else. But he's still using standard instruments and big orchestras, and there's still melody and rhythm there. But again, I really, if anyone's interested, please check The Electrician out, at least. A fantastic song. And then he disappeared for 4 or 5 years, came back in 1984 with Climate of Hunter, his own compositions apart from one song, which was a poem by Tennessee Williams. Again, he's using drums, bass, guitar, and orchestration. But then what's happening now is his lyrics are getting more like modern poetry, evoking things. The music is getting more angular, more disjointed. It still has some kind of 80s production on it, but I don't mind that. And in hindsight, the album is probably more accessible than it was at the time. You know, I could imagine it sounding very strange at the time. Again, it didn't do well commercially. But in hindsight, I love that album. I got to like it more and more. But again, he's still using the kind of verse chorus structure. But it wasn't until later that we really see the big shift. And it wasn't until 11 years after that album that another album came out. It took 11 years. When asked what he was doing in that time, Scott Walker said playing darts. You know, he's quite humorous about it. And And so what happened was he got a deal with 4AD, who just basically were great, said, do what you like, brilliant. He had that artistic freedom as much as the freedom he had when he was younger to have an orchestra at his hands. He was very fortunate that he could do this. And so, and then Tilt, this was my Elvis moment. Obviously Elvis shook the world with rock and roll. It was, it's hard for us to imagine how powerful rock and roll must have been and how strange it sounded. So this album, Tilt, for me, was my generation, for me, my inner revolution. Obviously, it wasn't shared with the world. It was the revolution in my head. It's like, I have never heard anything like this before. I had no idea what it was. Didn't know if I liked it or not. I thought, this is good. It was just challenging. I'd never heard anything like it. Starts off with this repetitive line like, do I hear 21? Do I hear 21? Rhythmical, monotonous rhythms. Then he just suddenly burst into some orchestration. He started to be really experimental here. But what I have to point out here is that he always said this, and the later stuff I'm going to mention in a bit, he always regarded them as songs. And so we don't put them really in the experimental avant-garde bracket. It's important that he said they're songs, because for me that's saying like this is the future, the possibilities of what music will be. And if you think the people who was influenced by this album, Radiohead, for example, OK Computer, which actually recorded in the same studio as Tilt, and David Bowie on the Outside album, and Bowie had always been influenced by Scott Walker, who's a big hero of David Bowie's from the 60s onwards. And he covered Night Flights from the Walker Brothers album I mentioned earlier. They kind of really were influenced by Scott and made it a bit more accessible to the listener. But it's still important, that, as I say, that he sees them as songs. And for me, that's like so exciting. Like, this is the future of music. You know, he's really pioneering something here. Again, the Tilt album is very dark. There are some beautiful melodies on it. There's a song, "The Patriot," which is wonderful. So there's still the melody there. There's still the big voice. But again, his words are getting more and more, like, as I say, modern poetry is the best way to describe it. And then he disappeared again. The album did quite well. He got a cult following, kind of hipster following, I guess, or people who didn't know, got a bit of a cult following, probably because of Bowie mentioning it as well. And then again, another 11 years went by. He did do some things during that period. He produced an album for Pulp. But then he came back to the Drift, and now he went really to the extreme. And now he's bringing sound in. For example, there's a sound where they're punching a big lump of meat for percussion. He makes the guitarist make the guitar sound like a donkey. So there's all this experimental stuff going on. And what you find as someone who's listened to it a lot, now I'm getting the structure, as it were. You know, there's a lot of silences sometimes, and his voice comes out in a silence, and then it's just interrupted by noise or guitars or drums or anything. It's like stop and start, and it would go somewhere else. It's not linear. It's kind of like a collage of sound and words. Jesse, the song on there, is about the Twin Towers, but he uses an analogy with Elvis Presley and his stillborn brother, whose name was Jesse. So Scott himself said he never wanted to be very obviously political. He'd rather come from a subject and look at it from a different angle, an unusual angle, which we probably could say is absurd and surreal. All these albums have linear notes to explain, and you know, if you really want to delve into it, then you can do and try and unlock some puzzles. But it's a frightening album, and there is humour in it, very dark in the Drift, and he always mentions that. Don't forget the humour that's in these records. And then let's go to the record Bish Bosh, which actually was released 6 years after. So for Scott, that was a short time. Hence the title is a bit of a joke. Bish Bosh it's an English term really for job done quickly and efficiently. So it's like Bish Bosh, you know, because it only took 6 years. In fact, it could have been quicker, but circumstances made it be a bit later as a release. And from Bish Bosh, he was very busy.
Which year are we talking about? The year of the release?
Okay, so yeah, Bish Bosh now is 2012. Okay, yeah, the Drift was 2006, so yeah, it was 6 years after the Drift, sorry. So yeah, 2012 is and here, like I said, the title Bish Bosh was a joke, as it were. Also, Bish, it was referring to slang like for bitch. Bosh is actually spelled with a C, you know, so it's the artist Bosh. And he saw the album as this theme, as a kind of giant universal female artist. He said it's about. He wanted to do from the perspective of a giant universal female artist. So whatever whatever that means. But you can delve into it again and trying to unlock the puzzle, as it were. And there's some great. There is fun on this, like the song. I have to remind myself the song "Corpse de Blah," which the introduction is farts, human farts. It's and there's some very funny words, self-deprecating stuff as well. But again, this is not a party album. This is it starts off with this just constant boom 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 drums, and then his voice comes saying these kind of what would appear to be random words, etc. There's a song in it that's 20 odd minutes long, and things like that. So again, of course, it is experimental. It is avant-garde.
Pink Floyd Sumaguma.
Could you say again? Sorry, Crow.
Kind of reminds me of Pink Floyd's Umaguma, first album, all experimental, and you had those. In the sense
maybe in some part,
because I remember there's I think a 20-minute song as well, and just a lot of sound experiments. And you are describing the album, and that's why I checked the date, 2012, because I was really reminded of the 60s and all that experimentalism happening in music.
Yeah. I mean, experimentation is a strange word. You could say the Beatles were experimental. What does it mean? It's a broad term, isn't it? So they experimented in the studio, George Martin and that. But then I think sometimes when we use the term, we're talking about avant-garde and, noiescapes and stuff like that. So I understand what you mean about Pink Floyd, but I think with Pink Floyd, it's more musical with Pink Floyd as well. For one thing, Scott Walker made sure in the later albums of the musicians to never get into a groove. He never wanted, that was like a rule, don't get into a groove. And so sometimes people were disappointed when they listen to Bish Bosch. He goes into a lovely melody, then just suddenly stops and goes somewhere else. It's very stop and start, juxtapositions of things coming from all angles. So it's not entertaining in any way musically, you could probably say. I suppose you could say you could look at it as a work of art, how you would look at a work of art, especially modern art, contemporary art. And if you want to delve deeper into it, then do so. Like as you would with a work of art. It's kind of, to me, it sounds a bit pretentious, but I think. This is an album that should be in an art gallery. It's kind of an idea, as it were. And for me, it's extraordinary. As I said before, you could ease yourself into these albums by going backwards. A lot of Scott fans are divided. They love the early stuff, they hate the later stuff, and they wish he would sing. Well, not anymore because he's passed away, but they wish he could have returned back to those older songs. But my point of view is he's already done that. They're there. You don't. Why go back? And it shows to me he's a true artist who's following his vocation and he's going to do. He had the opportunity to do it, and he's following it. So he's unique. He's one-off. And I admire that in artists. It doesn't even matter about taste if you like it or not. It's like someone's following their path. That they're going to do it no matter what. I admire that so much. I mean, so to listen to Bish Bosch, for the fun of it, I think as a dare, I think especially if you really are not aware of it, I dare you to put it on your headphones and listen to it all the way through. It's like sort the men out from the boys. It's like this is a challenge, like to put it on and listen to it all the way through. And then you can make up your mind about it, what you think about it. But it is an acquired taste. It did take me a long time, but then again, it got me straight away, simply because I've not heard this. This is so new. This is so original to me. This is what I've been looking for, waiting for. My Elvis moment, as it were. And there it was. He's so important to me. Because of that. And even if those who's listening here and who want to go into it, either way, getting to Scott Walker, even his early stuff, I can understand people who are into his early stuff might not like the later stuff. Very few of us are fans who like both two parts, as it were, the later and the earlier parts. That's. But that I come from an art background, and I kind of have that kind of mind of that as well. So basically, what I'm saying, don't put this on expecting to have fun. It is very challenging. But I always think it's always going to something familiar. A lot of people are scared of something that they don't know, they don't understand, that they're not familiar with. We see this on the social media, knee-jerk reactions, and usually when they don't understand something, they just attack and say this is crap, this is pretentious bollocks or whatever. Or, it's like, well, I can't really take your opinion seriously if you haven't delved into something. So for Scott Walker, if someone's delved into it and understood it, and then they can have an opinion saying they don't think it's any good, then that's fair enough, because they can back it up with something. So as I said before, taste is kind of irrelevant to this. If you don't like it, you don't like it, leave it alone. And if you're open to something really new and to go into a territory that is so unfamiliar with you, it's wonderful. I think it's so exciting. Even if you hate it, even if it does something to you that just makes you feel uncomfortable or disturbing, the admiration I have for
the songs that put us off the first time we listen to them are the ones that we go back to later on.
Oh yeah, all the time. I've always found that you buy an album, don't you, because I love that track, and then the one you love you kind of don't listen to, and you always listen to the one that's what do they call them? Cuts. What do they call them? When rough cuts. No. They're not familiar ones anyway. Yeah. And you always go back to, I don't like that too much, and then later on, that's really good. I agree totally. With me, with the let's call the trilogy, Bish, Bosch, and the Drift and the Tilt, the trilogy. I think every time you return to them, you don't play these albums regularly. You go back to them like a novel or a film, and when every time you go back, you find something else new. It's like a world. I think Bish Bosch, I've got it in 2012. I've probably listened to it 6 times, but every time I go back to it, it's a wonderful experience. Quickly as well, he. After Bish Bosch, he did a collaboration with Sun on the Soused album. Some of your listeners might know Sun because they're quite a heavy rock kind of band. I say Sun, I think that's how it's pronounced, but it's written Sunn and it's got a 0 and like these brackets, 4 brackets. I think it's pronounced Sun, Soused. And he also did some film school, so he's very busy. So when he passed away, I was really shocked. He's a very private man. I didn't even know the guy was married and had children. That's how private he was, which is great. He kept his art separate to the person. So it was a real shock when he passed away. And this guy means a lot to me. Really means a lot. So that's why I wanted to really look at him today, and hopefully I've managed to get some things out in such a short amount of time. But I would recommend, if anyone interested to discover more about Scott, a good introduction is a documentary called 30th Century Man, which I do think you can, I think it is available on YouTube, I think. But last time, I've got it on DVD and stuff, but I think I did see it on YouTube. I can't remember when I saw that it had been uploaded on YouTube by someone. And so that's a really good introduction to really understand the process, and it goes back to the beginnings as well, kind of what I've tried to cram in this 10 minutes.
That's a lot.
So yeah, Bish Bosch.
That is definitely a lot of history around one album. So yeah.
Yeah. But as I say, when you see him in interviews, he's very humble, he's very funny, self-deprecating. He's certainly not the kind of character you picture when you listen to the record. You probably think he's this man who lives on his own in a dark room, totally cut off from the world, but he's far from it. He's very normal. I'll just quickly tell you a nice story when he worked with Jarvis Cocker on the Pulp album, is that he always wore a cap later on, and the cat would be down over his eyes, and once he started to trust you, the cat would slowly rise until he got eye contact with you, and when that happened, then you realised you're doing something good, or there's a good relationship now, I guess. As I say, to me, he is a genius, and that word is thrown around. I think anyone who puts something in the world that is totally unique, that has never been put into the world before, whatever you think about it, has to be admired, has to be congratulated and celebrated. And for me, this guy will be seen as the future of modern music, even in popular music, not just underground. Black Star, for example.
And I believe that people have by now realized that your choices are not actually the most recent albums, but albums that have marked in some way the history of music in one way or another.
Y- Yeah, I mean, when you invited me to do this, I thought about it, and I thought, I'd try and, just things that I don't know, whatever. And the next week I might do something just straightforward and that. But yeah, I think I'm very interested in people who consider pioneers, and who are very influential and not really recognised for it,
Yeah.
who really did deserve the recognition.
Give them their
Black Star, for example, a lovely album.
Okay, so thank you for that review today. And I'm really interested in what you have in mind for next week, because this has been very, very educated. And
Oh no, no, I probably, like, I just wanted to get Scott off my chest. It was just I was thinking actually, I was thinking about the Doors because I fell out with the Doors when I was in my 20s, and I got back to love them again. So maybe I'll do something. Maybe I'll do something on the Doors.
we don't do spoilers.
I'm sorry, I won't do the Doors.
Yes, you will, but don't spoil. The Doors will actually be fun. Yeah, I think so. Okay. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure you got no problem.
see you
Thanks for
next
inviting
week.
me.
I'll just like to remind everyone that tomorrow there will not be a live stream. We'll take a day off, but we'll be back on Thursday with our second guitar lesson with Will from Abigail. See you there. Bye.